hangar buzzed with laughter as Admiral Whitaker smirked, pointing at her mop. "Why don't you fly it then?" Everyone laughed except Lena. She just stared at the A-10, calm, silent, and impossibly ready. "Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and let's see who's joining us as we watch a janitor take control of an A-10 like no one imagined. The hangar smelled of oil and metal. Dust swirled in the late afternoon sunlight that poured through the high windows. Lena pushed her mop slowly across the floor, the rhythmic squeak echoing in the cavernous space. She didn't glance up at the pilots joking by the parked A-10. She didn't need to. Laughter bounced off the walls. She could hear boots clanging on metal stairs, voices carrying over the roar of the ventilation. One of the younger lieutenants mimicked a barrel roll with his hands, spinning invisible controls. "She thinks she can fly that thing?" another joked. Lena kept her head down, the mop gliding over a streak of oil near the landing gear. She knew the jet better than anyone here. Not that anyone would guess. Not that it mattered. Admiral Whitaker's boots clicked against the concrete. The laughter quieted just a little, the energy shifting as he stepped closer. He stopped near Lena, looked down at her quietly sweeping, then smirked. "Why don't you fly it then?" he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The hangar erupted in laughter. Heads turned. Phones lifted. Officers leaned on railings, nudging each other, eyes wide. Some laughed so hard they doubled over. Lena's hands froze for a fraction of a second on the mop handle. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She just tilted her head slightly and kept sweeping. Dust swirled around the wheels of the jet, sunlight catching the scratches on the gray paint. One of the pilots called out, teasing, "Careful, don't crash it." Another laughed, "Yeah, janitor, don't scratch our baby." Her grip on the mop tightened slightly, but her movements remained steady. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She knew the A-10 inside out, the panels, the switches, the hum of the engine before it even started. A low murmur ran through the group, curiosity mingling with amusement. "She's just going to mop the floor," someone muttered half to themselves. Lena exhaled softly, almost invisible. She let the mop swipe the streak of oil one last time and leaned slightly on the handle. The laughter rolled on around her, but she stayed calm, quiet, and measured. For the first time that afternoon, all eyes flicked toward her. Not expecting anything, not imagining she could do anything, but somehow noticing her presence. She didn't move toward the A-10. She didn't speak. She just stood there, steady, eyes on the jet, calm as the hangar hummed with amusement around her. And for a moment, the laughter sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. The hum of fluorescent lights replaced the laughter from the hangar as Lena's mop swung in quiet arcs. Her eyes, however, drifted to the A-10 as if the gray metal could speak. And in her mind it did. Flashback. A younger Lena knelt by the open engine panel, sleeves rolled up, grease staining her forearms. She traced wires and hydraulic lines with careful fingers, listening for the faintest vibration. "Pressure readings are off by 0.2, she murmured to herself, almost inaudible. The instructor glanced over her shoulder. "Not bad, Morales. Not bad at all." Back to present. The mop squeaked across the floor again, but Lena's mind replayed more memories. She remembered the cockpit layouts she had memorized long before she cleaned the floors. Every switch, every gauge, every warning light had a place in her mind. She could picture the layout blindfolded, fingers brushing invisible panels as if she were already inside. Flashback. She sat in a briefing room, quiet in the back row. Pilots shouted callouts. Flight paths, attack vectors, refueling points. Lena followed every detail, writing notes in a small notebook she kept tucked in her jacket. No one ever asked her opinion. No one ever noticed her. And yet she absorbed it all. "Formation delta is off by 3 degrees, she whispered under her breath. The pilot next to her glanced over. "What did you say?" She didn't answer, just wrote it down, knowing it might save someone one day. Back to present. Lena paused at a streak of oil, dipping the mop to wipe it clean, her movements methodical. She heard the boots and laughter fade into background noise. The hangar was full of people, but none of them mattered to her. Her attention was on the jet, on the details only she could hear, the faint hiss of a hydraulic valve, the subtle creak of landing gear struts settling. Flashback. She adjusted the avionics panel, tracing the circuits with precise care. If this relay fails mid-flight, the whole system could lock, she told the crew chief. He shook his head, impressed. You've got eyes everywhere, Morales. How do you do it? She shrugged, not answering, just continued her work. Back to present. The mop stopped for a moment. Lena leaned slightly on the handle, listening. She could feel the rhythm of the hangar, the vibrations through the floor, the pulse of the engines at rest. Her hands knew what the pilots often missed. Her ears caught what the instruments might not. And her mind held years of silent preparation. Voiceover. Soft. I've kept them flying. I've always been here. A shadow of a smile touched her lips. Not for anyone else, but for herself. She knew what she could do. And though no one had ever asked, she had always been ready. The hangar remained full of laughter and chatter around her. Oblivious. Lena's calm face, steady hands, and quiet awareness made her seem ordinary. But beneath the mop and the uniform, she carried the knowledge of someone who had lived in the heart of the A-10 for years. Someone who had quietly mastered what others thought impossible. Lena paused mid-sweep, hand on the mop handle. A soft click from the A-10's nose gear caught her attention. She bent slightly, eyes scanning the small panel near the landing strut. A tiny hydraulic gauge flickered for a fraction of a second, nothing critical, but enough for her trained eye to notice. Pressure fluctuation, she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. A lieutenant glanced down from the railing above, half smirking. What was that? Lena straightened. The hydraulic reading, momentary dip in the left strut, could indicate a minor issue with the servo pump. Really? The lieutenant laughed. Or maybe you just like staring at dials while you mop. Her lips pressed together, and she tilted her head just slightly, eyes still on the jet. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. A junior pilot leaning against the staircase whispered to his friend, just loud enough for her to hear. She's just a janitor. Why is she even talking? Yeah, another added with a chuckle. Unless she wants to fly it with a broomstick, I don't think it matters. Lena's hand tightened briefly on the mop, then released. She moved around the streak of oil, brushing it away with the tip of her mop. Her face remained calm, almost serene, while the hangar echoed with laughter and dismissive chatter. One of the senior officers walked by, shaking his head. Don't mind her, he said, patting a pilot on the shoulder. She means well, but she doesn't run this base. Let's focus on the real work. Lena's gaze didn't leave the jet. She watched the panels, the control surfaces, the landing gear. Every movement of the aircraft, however subtle, told her something. The flicker of that gauge wasn't critical, but it was a signal, and she understood what it meant. Another pilot stepped closer to the A-10, laughing and pointing. You see, Morales? Nothing to worry about. Just a jet resting. You okay with that? She exhaled softly through her nose. Not in frustration, not in anger. She simply nodded, almost imperceptibly, then bent back to the floor. Her mop moved steadily, quietly, as if the laughter and scoffing were just part of the background noise she'd always worked around. A voice rang out from across the hangar. Honestly, Admiral, she's fine. She's harmless. Lena's eyes flicked up toward the source. The word stung, not because of malice but because of assumption. Harmless. Invisible. Nothing more than a fixture in the hangar. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She already knew how invisible she was. Her thoughts drifted back to the hours she'd spent memorizing cockpit layouts, checking hydraulic pressures, listening to pilots' callouts. All of it dismissed. All of it unseen. She leaned lightly on her mop handle, letting her eyes trace the edges of the A-10, every panel, every hatch. The hangar remained alive with chatter, laughter, and casual dismissal. But in that quiet space around the jet, She existed in her own rhythm, aware of things others ignored. And though the officers and pilots thought they were right to disregard her, Lena knew one truth. She had been paying attention all along. Every detail mattered. Every signal counted. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. She just waited. The laughter faded, replaced by a low murmur as Admiral Whitaker straightened and crossed his arms. His eyes held a spark, half curiosity, half challenge. "Fine," he said, voice firm but not unkind. "Show us then." The hangar went quiet. Heads turned, some in surprise, some in disbelief. Phones lowered. Even the junior pilots who had whispered seconds before now watched, leaning on railings, uncertain. Lena paused mid-step with her mop, letting the words sink in. She tilted her head slightly, then placed the mop in a corner, careful not to scratch the floor. Every movement was measured, calm. She walked toward the A-10, her boots echoing softly against the concrete. Her eyes scanned the jet, taking in every panel, every seam, every hatch. The sun caught on the scratches along the fuselage, glinting like tiny stars. She could hear the faint hiss of residual hydraulics and the subtle ticking of cooling systems. The sounds were quiet, but to her they spoke volumes. One of the pilots muttered, half to himself, "She's actually going to do it. Better not break it." Another whispered, trying to mask a laugh. Lena ignored them. She stopped at the side of the cockpit and ran her fingers along the edges, almost brushing the surface lightly. Then she began inspecting the panels, her movements precise. She checked switches, gauges, and warning lights, as if reading a language only she fully understood. The hangar seemed to shrink around her. The hum of fluorescent lights, the distant clatter of boots, even the faint chatter of pilots, all faded into the background. All that remained was the jet and her focus. "Step aside," Lena said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. She climbed the ladder to the cockpit with steady hands, each foot placed carefully, her balance perfect. She paused at the top, looking down at the floor, then up at the controls. The canopy reflected her face for a moment, calm, composed, unreadable. She inhaled softly and lowered herself into the seat, settling in like she belonged there, even if no one else thought so. Admiral Whitaker leaned on the railing, watching closely. "Go on then. Let's see what you've got," he said, a half-smile tugging at his lips. Lena's fingers moved over the panels, flipping switches, checking dials, her eyes scanning the cockpit layout. Every motion was deliberate, every glance measured. She could feel the jet, almost like a heartbeat beneath her hands. A younger officer whispered nervously, I didn't think she'd actually climb in." Another muttered, "She's calm, too calm." Lena adjusted a knob near the throttle, listened to the faint clicks and hums of the systems, then nodded slightly to herself. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't need to. Her confidence wasn't loud. It was steady, quiet, and undeniable. The hangar held its breath. Every eye was on her. For the first time, she felt the room's attention, but she didn't let it distract her. She was still just doing what she had always done. Observing, understanding, preparing. The joke had turned into a challenge. And for the first time, everyone watching knew it was real. Lena's fingers moved over the cockpit switches with quiet confidence, flipping toggles and pressing buttons in the precise sequence she had memorized years ago. Each light blinked as expected. Each gauge ticked into place. The hum of the systems grew slightly louder, filling the cockpit with a low, steady vibration. "Battery check, power stable," she said softly, almost to herself. "Wait, is she actually doing this right?" One pilot whispered, leaning on the railing above. "Looks like it," another murmured. I don't believe it." Lena didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her attention was on the dials, the panels, the tiniest flicker in the instruments that could go unnoticed by anyone else. Her hand hovered over the throttle, listening to the subtle hiss of air pressure. "Hydraulic pressure, left strut dipping slightly," she said calmly. Her voice carried over the cockpit intercom just enough for the pilots and officers to hear. "Servo response within limits," but needs monitoring. A murmur ran through the hangar. Heads tilted, eyes widening. Some officers exchanged nervous glances. The jet systems hadn't flagged anything unusual. Yet here she was, reading the details like a book. One of the younger lieutenants muttered, "How does she even notice that? I didn't see it." Lena moved to the avionics panel, checking each connection, flipping a switch here, nudging a dial there. She listened for the faintest clicks, the subtle hum of circuits engaging. Every motion was deliberate, confident, unhurried. "Communications, all channels clear," she said, scanning the frequency readouts. "Navigation, no errors. Fuel valves secure. Oxygen system nominal." The hangar had gone almost silent now. Even the chatter that had once accompanied the dare was replaced by quiet astonishment. "She's methodical," someone whispered. "I've never seen anyone run it like that." Lena paused for a moment, listening. A tiny vibration from the landing gear caught her attention. She traced it with her eyes, noting the subtle timing. "Landing strut, port side," she said quietly. "Valve seating slightly delayed. Not critical, but needs watching on takeoff." A senior officer cleared his throat, stepping closer to the cockpit ladder. "Morales, are you sure?" His tone wasn't rude, but cautious, hesitant. Lena's eyes didn't leave the panels. "Yes, sir. Everything else is within normal parameters." Her voice was steady, calm. No pride, no showmanship. Just facts. A younger pilot shook his head, whispering to his friend, "She's doing it better than some of our trainees. Better than I could, honestly." Lena continued down the checklist, running through engine tests, flaps, control surfaces, and systems checks. Each call-out precise, each observation exact. She didn't hurry. She didn't falter. The tension in the hangar grew. Everyone watching could see that she could do this. She could handle the aircraft perfectly. But the unspoken question hung in the air. Would anyone actually let her take it further? Her calm face, steady hands, and quiet confidence filled the cockpit with a sense of authority that contradicted the uniform she wore. She wasn't a pilot by title, but she moved like one. She didn't need permission to know the jet inside and out. And yet, the room outside the cockpit still held its breath. Lena's hands gripped the controls with steady pressure, thumbs brushing switches with careful precision. The hum of the A-10 thrummed beneath her, low and steady, vibrating through her fingertips. "Clear on final systems check," she called quietly, voice calm, almost a whisper to herself. The ramp operator gave a nod from the ground. "Clear for taxi," he said. Lena eased the throttle forward. The jet rolled smoothly along the hangar apron. Concrete blurred beneath the wheels. Dust swirled around the edges as the engines whispered their readiness. She kept her eyes forward, scanning the runway markers, reading the faint vibrations through the landing gear. "Look at her go!" a junior pilot muttered from the railing, leaning forward. "She's actually doing it." Lena didn't respond. Her mind was alive with rhythm. Engines, hydraulics, air pressure, control surfaces. Every vibration had meaning. Every click of a switch was a note in a pattern she had known for years. She reached the end of the runway. A soft press of the throttle, a gentle pull on the stick. The nose lifted slightly. Wheels rolled over air, leaving the ground behind in a whisper of wind and dust. The A-10 climbed steadily, not fast, not reckless, controlled, precise. Lena's eyes tracked the horizon. The sun caught the canopy, reflecting across her calm face. Dust and heat shimmered below, but up here, everything felt measured, deliberate. A murmured gasp ran through the hangar. "She's flying it," someone whispered. "How?" Lena's hands danced over the panels, nudging controls, checking readouts. She didn't need to look at the instruments, they were familiar, predictable. She listened to the jet's voice, subtle hisses and vibrations only someone who had lived with the aircraft could hear. "Altitude stable," she said softly, almost to herself. Flaps responding, hydraulics nominal. The camera, if someone were watching, would catch the slight flex of her fingers on the stick, the gentle tap of her foot on the rudder pedals. Each movement precise, fluid, unhurried. The jet responded to her as if it had been waiting for her touch all along. On the ground, pilots and officers held their breath. Phones hovered, hands frozen. The laughter from before was gone. All that remained was awe, a quiet disbelief. "She's calm," someone whispered. "Too calm for this." Lena adjusted a knob near the throttle, listened to the faint click of the hydraulic relief valve, and nodded to herself. Dust swirled beneath in tiny clouds, catching the late afternoon sun, but she didn't look down. Her eyes stayed on the horizon, scanning, calculating, moving in rhythm with the aircraft she knew better than anyone here. A soft exhale escaped her lips. Not relief, not pride, just focus. The liftoff was clean, controlled, and perfect. Every movement of the jet matched her intent. And for the first time that afternoon, the hangar below was silent. All eyes lifted, watching a janitor fly in A-10 with a mastery no one had expected. She didn't glance at them. She didn't need their approval. She was already in her element. High above the ground, steady, precise, and undeniably in control. The sky opened above her. The earth stretched below. And for the first time, everyone watching could see what had always been invisible. Lena eased the A-10 into a gentle bank, eyes scanning every dial, every gauge, every flicker of light. The jet hummed beneath her hands, steady, obedient. Yet her trained instincts caught a subtle irregularity, a faint delay in the left landing strut's hydraulic response. Nothing the systems flagged. Nothing the pilots had noticed. But she did. "Ground. This is Morales," she said calmly into the radio, voice low but clear. "Left strut shows minor delay in response. No immediate danger, but I'm monitoring closely." A crackle answered. "Copy, Morales. We see you." She adjusted the stick, running a precise, small maneuver, just enough to test the hydraulic system under a light load. The A-10 flexed subtly beneath her, a whisper of metal against wind. She watched the gauges, listening to the faint hiss of fluid moving through the lines. On the ground, pilots leaned over laptops and telemetry screens. Eyes widened as they watched the numbers respond. Tiny variations no one had noticed until now. "She's reading it," one muttered. "She's seeing what we can't." Lena's hands were steady. She nudged a lever, checked the indicator again, then made a slight roll to relieve pressure on the strut. Every motion was deliberate, controlled, predictable. The jet responded perfectly, as if acknowledging her authority. "Hydraulic stabilizing," she called. "Pressure equalizing. System nominal under test conditions." The murmurs from below grew louder. Phones and cameras aimed upward. Pilots whispered, incredulous. "She's doing what? That's impossible." She didn't react to their awe. Her focus was on the jet, on every subtle movement. She could feel the difference in pressure through the control stick, hear the smallest hiss of air in the lines, detect vibrations that would escape almost anyone else. A junior officer leaned on the railing. How does she know that without instruments alerting it?" "She's calm," another said. "Too calm for this. She's reading the plane." Lena initiated another subtle maneuver, tilting the nose slightly, testing the strut under weight without stressing the aircraft. She scanned every gauge again. The hydraulic delay corrected itself exactly as she predicted. Left strut stabilized. "All systems within normal parameters," she said, her voice soft but precise. Even the Admiral, leaning against the railing, whispered to himself, disbelief in his tone. "She's handling it better than some of our pilots would." The A-10 climbed higher, cutting through the afternoon sky, wings steady. Lena didn't smile, didn't gloat. She just monitored, adjusted, and responded. Every tiny shift in the aircraft was met with measured action. Every faint irregularity she corrected before it became a problem. From the hangar, cameras caught the close-ups. Her fingers on switches, the subtle tilt of the throttle, the small movements of the stick. Pilots and officers stared, eyes wide, silent. The impossible, someone they thought invisible mastering the jet flawlessly, was unfolding before them. Lena exhaled softly, eyes scanning the horizon, calm, precise, in control. The jet moved like an extension of herself, every system responding exactly as she had trained to predict. And for the first time that afternoon, everyone watching realized the truth. What they had thought impossible had been possible all along. Lena eased the A-10 into its final approach, eyes scanning the runway markings. The engines hummed steadily beneath her, responding perfectly to her gentle adjustments. She felt every vibration through the controls, every subtle shift of the jet under her hands. Flaps deployed, landing gear down, she said quietly, checking each gauge. The hydraulic pressure for the left strut, the subtle issue she had corrected mid-flight, held perfectly. The hangar crew and officers watched from the perimeter, phones raised but fingers frozen. No one spoke. No one breathed too loudly. They were waiting, uncertain, as if the very act of her landing might defy reality. She tilted the nose slightly, guided the wheels onto the runway with measured precision. The tires kissed the asphalt softly, and she felt the familiar resistance of the ground through the controls. A gentle brake, a slight pull on the rudder, and the jet slowed, rolling smoothly. Throttle back, brakes engaged, she called, her voice calm, almost casual. The hum of the engines lowered, settling into a quiet, steady purr. Dust from the taxiway rose in faint swirls around the wheels. Lena eased the jet to a stop, cut the engines, and let the canopy hiss as it sealed. A deep silence fell over the hangar. The echo of the engines shutting down lingered, filling the space in a way that made words feel unnecessary. Phones lowered, faces stared, mouths opened and closed, trying to find a sound, a response, a clue about what had just happened. She landed it perfectly, a young lieutenant whispered, voice trembling slightly. No alarms, no errors, not even a scratch. Another added, disbelief in his tone. The Admiral leaned on the railing, his expression unreadable. A faint furrow creased his brow, but there was no applause, no sudden cheer, just a quiet, almost uncomfortable realization. He shifted his weight, eyes on Lena, as if finally seeing her for the first time. Lena sat in the cockpit a moment longer, hands resting lightly on the controls. She exhaled softly, steadying herself. Her face was calm, unreadable, as always. No pride, no celebration, just observation. A junior officer stepped forward, whispering, I thought this was impossible. Lena tilted her head slightly, glancing at the instrument panels one last time. Everything read nominal. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence carried authority. She climbed down the ladder carefully, boots clicking on the runway. Dust settled around her as she reached the ground. The hangar was still quiet, the audience still processing what they had just witnessed. Laughter, jokes, and dismissive whispers from earlier seemed distant, almost unreal. Her mop was in her hand again, waiting. She picked it up as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The jet behind her gleamed under the afternoon sun. Flawless, silent. No one clapped. No one cheered. But for the first time that day, the room was no longer filled with laughter. There was a weight in the silence, a recognition that had not yet found words. And in that quiet, Lena moved as she always did. Steady, unassuming, fully in control, carrying proof of her skill not in noise or applause, but in results. The hangar was quiet now, the A-10 gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Lena pushed her mop slowly across the floor, careful not to disturb the faint dust still swirling from takeoff and landing. The murmurs of disbelief from earlier had faded into hushed conversations, officers and pilots exchanging glances that spoke more than words. Admiral Whitaker approached, his boots clicking softly on the concrete. He stopped a few feet from her, hands behind his back. Morales, he said quietly. His tone was different, no teasing, no joke. Serious, respectful. Lena looked up, her eyes calm. She waited. I need to see your records, he said. His voice carried the weight of someone admitting a mistake he hadn't expected to make. She nodded slightly and gestured toward the small office at the edge of the hangar. They walked side by side, Lena's boots clicking softly, her mop forgotten in a corner. The Admiral pulled up her file on a terminal. Pages of service records, training logs, maintenance certifications, cockpit observations, all carefully filed but mostly ignored. He scrolled slowly, eyes scanning, lips pressed together. I had no idea, he said finally, shaking his head. You've been here all this time, quiet, invisible, and yet... He looked at her, a mixture of admiration and regret in his eyes. You've mastered this aircraft better than many pilots in this room. Lena exhaled softly. She didn't smile. She didn't argue. She had never sought praise. Her calm had always been enough for her. You should have been noticed sooner, the Admiral said. Not just as a janitor, not just someone who cleans floors. You've kept these jets flying. You've saved us from problems we didn't even know existed. She tilted her head slightly, letting the words sink in. Her hands rested lightly on the edge of the desk. She didn't speak immediately. The room was still. The silence carried the weight of years spent being overlooked. I misjudged the system, he continued. The way it failed to see you. That was my mistake. Our mistake. We have rules, hierarchies, and somehow all of that hid your skill. He paused, then looked directly at her. You deserve recognition, Morales. Not just from me, but from everyone who works here. A soft breeze from the open hangar doors stirred the papers on the desk. Lena's eyes traced the lines of her records. She exhaled again, not from relief or pride, but from acknowledgement. Finally, someone saw what she had always been. I've always done my work, she said quietly. I've always been here. That's enough. The Admiral nodded, understanding. It's not enough for them to not notice, he said softly. It's enough that you were right, that you were ready when it mattered. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the sun cast long shadows across the hangar floor. The jet gleamed silently behind them, a testament to skill, persistence, and patience. And in that quiet recognition, Lena's presence was no longer invisible. The system had failed before, but now, at last, someone understood. The hangar was quiet under the soft glow of overhead lights. Lena pushed her mop along the floor, dust swirling in faint beams that caught on the A-10's gray metal. The jet gleamed, calm and still, a silent witness to the day's events. Mechanics and pilots passed by, pausing for a nod or a small smile. No fanfare, no applause, just acknowledgement. Evening, Morales, one whispered. Another simply gave a respectful glance. She didn't pause. She didn't rush. Each swipe of the mop was deliberate, careful, precise, her own rhythm. She glanced at the landing gear, the panels she had known inside out, then back to the floor she kept clean. A soft voice in her mind echoed. I didn't need applause. I needed to be seen. She exhaled softly, letting the words settle. Recognition didn't have to be loud. It didn't have to come in cheers. Could be quiet, subtle, the kind that mattered. Outside, the wind brushed the hangar doors, carrying faint sounds of engines settling for the night. Lena's eyes traced the jet, her fingers brushing the mop handle with gentle familiarity. She had left her mark, not in noise, but in respect earned, in skill finally acknowledged, in a legacy that no one could overlook. She straightened, nodded once to the A-10, and continued mopping. Calm. Seen. Enough. What did you think of Lena's journey from janitor to A-10 master? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your take. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so more people can witness her incredible journey.